Hello and welcome back to the Ash and Stone channel. My name is Chris and today we're going to have the second game in the solo narrative campaign series. It's going to be a bit of a spin on the classic Oathmark scenario from the books, so you'll have to let me know what you think down below. But let's get right into it and carry on with the story.
Having driven off the raiders attacking Stony Creek Burr, Baridoc Kingsson continues his march north to the town of Goldenfields. He arrives a hero, and a great feast is thrown in his honour. But when asking for aid in his quest, the town master, Harbin Moore, is unwilling to commit. Black stone goblin raids have been increasing along the southern border, and he requires his men to keep the town safe. If, however, the town were to make a show of strength, the goblins may think twice about continuing their raids. Baridoc reluctantly agrees. He requests messengers sent to the local dwarf clans, and begins to march south with a handful of humans to give the Blackstone goblins a solid punch in the snout.
So for the forces of the dwarves and humans, we have Baridoc Kingsson, the prince himself, leading the Hammerheart Oathsworn, 9 dwarf soldiers, with a detachment of 5 dwarf archers. And allied with him for this scenario, we have the human champion, Edmund the Ox, leading the Goldenfield Spears, 9 human spearmen, and 10 human archers, the Goldenfield Bowmen. For the forces of the Blackstone Goblins, we have 20 goblin soldiers, 10 goblin spears, 10 goblin archers, and 2 units of 2 goblin archers. And here is the board all set up for turn 1. So as I said earlier, the game is going to be a modified version of the Oathmark scenario. Instead of destroying Oathmarks, the dwarves and humans will be required to destroy 2 goblin towers. The goblin towers are currently garrisoned by 2 goblin archers each, and while in the tower they will gain shielding 1, cover from shooting attacks, and the enormous roar. So we'll see how it goes. Both sides are deployed 8 inches from their edge, and let's get started with an initiative roll. So 2 dice each, blue for the dwarves and ivory for the goblins. Looks like initiative goes to the goblins with a 10. And the goblins will be starting by activating one of the towers. Which tower doesn't matter. We've got the closest one here, which can shoot at the dwarves, and the further tower, which is capable of shooting at the humans. So I'm just going to roll a dice for them. On a 1 to 5, it will be the closest tower. The further tower is going to attempt to activate. 2 dice. They will require 6s. They succeed with a 9. So, being goblin archers, they will be shooting at the closest target, which just happens to be the Goldenfield Spears. They'll get 1 dice because the Goldenfield Spears will shield, and they are shoot 1 against defense 9. So on an 8, they will knock out one of the spears. Unfortunately not. Alright, on to the humans and dwarves' turn. In retaliation, the dwarves will be activating the detachment of archers. They are within 6 inches of Baridoc Kingsson, so they will get 3 dice for their activation, requiring 4s. They succeed, and they will be shooting at their closest target, which just happens to be the goblins in that tower. So 5 dice get reduced to 4 because the goblins have shielding. We are shoot 2, -1 for cover against defense 9. We require 8s to cause a wound. And there are 2 9s there, so we managed to wipe both goblins out of that tower. And following that fancy shooting, the dwarves will then advance 5 inches. And end their turn there. We now get to choose which of the goblins will activate. None of them are in an advantageous position, so I'm simply going to roll a dice. 1, 2, 3 soldiers. 4, 5, 6 the archers, 7, 8, 9 the spears, and on a 10 I will re-roll. 8, so the spearmen are going to be activating first. 2 dice, they will require 6s. They succeed with a 9. And so the Blackstone Spear Goblins will be advancing 6 inches. Followed by 3 as their second action. And then it is the Dwarves and Humans' turn, and they will be activating Baridoc Kingsson and his Shield Dwarves. So 3 dice, requiring 4s, and they've failed their activation. So they will get 1 action, and they will be moving forward 5 inches. And ending their turn there. Back to the Goblins, and which one activates doesn't really matter, so again I'll be rolling a dice. 1 to 5 it'll be the soldiers, 6 to 10 it'll be the archers. We get a 3, so the soldiers will be attempting to activate. 2 dice requiring 6s, they succeed. And they will use their action to advance 6 inches. And then their second action, they're going to wheel towards the hill on that front corner. Like so. Back to the humans and dwarves, we'll be attempting to activate the human archers. They will get 2 dice, requiring 5s. They succeed with a 5. And they will be shooting at the closest target, the goblins in the tower. So 4 dice because they have shielding. Shoot 2, +1 for having an extra rank, -1 for cover. So shoot 2 on defense 9, they will require 7s. And there are 2 casualties there. Well, those archers didn't last very long. And then their second action will be to move directly forward 6 inches. And move past these spears in front of them. Ending their turn there. The final goblin unit to activate will be the goblin archers. 2 dice requiring 6s. They fail their activation with a 5. So they'll get 1 action and they'll be using that to advance 6 inches. And the last unit to activate is Edmund the Ox and his Goldenfield spears. 2 dice requiring 5s. They succeed with a 9. And they will be advancing forward 6 and then a further 3 inches. So here we are at the end of turn 1. The towers have been silenced and the 2 forces move forward to engage with each other. We begin turn 2 with an initiative roll. The initiative goes to the goblins with a 9. And the first goblin unit to attempt to activate will be the archers, because they are the only ones who are able to cause damage to the enemy. So 2 dice requiring 6s. They succeed with a 10. They will use their first action to advance 2.5 inches, which will get them in range to shoot at Baridoc Kingsson and his dwarf soldiers. So they'll get 4 dice because the dwarves have shielding. Shoot 1, +1 for having an extra rank, gives us shoot 2 against defense 9, requiring 8s. There is a 10 there, so one of the dwarves goes down with an arrow in his belly. So with that casualty, the Hammerheart Oathsworn will be required to take a morale check. 3 dice, -1 for the casualty, but +1 for it being a shooting attack. They will require 4s. They succeed with a 5. On the Dwarves and Humans' turn, we'll be attempting to activate the Goldenfield Bowmen. 2 dice requiring 5s. We succeed with a 9. And they will be advancing up to 6 inches behind the Goldenfield spears in order to fire over and shoot the goblin soldiers. So 4 dice because the soldiers have shields. Shoot 2, +1 for having an extra rank, but -1 for having moving. Against defense 9 means we require 7s. There are 3 casualties there, 10, 10 and 9, so 3 of the goblins go down. This will require the goblins to make a morale check. They will take it at -3 for casualties, +1 for shooting, and +1 for having more than 2 ranks. So -1, they will require 7s. They fail, so they are disordered. So on the goblins' turn, we will attempt to activate those soldiers and clear that disordered token. They get -1 because they are disordered, so they will require 7s. They succeed with a 7, so they are no longer disordered, but they can only make a simple action, which will be to advance 6 inches and get to that hill. On the dwarves' turn, we're going to attempt to activate the archers. 3 dice, because we're within 6 inches of Baridoc Kingsson, requiring 4s. They succeed easily, and from where they are, they will be shooting at the closest target, the goblin spearmen. They will receive 4 dice because the goblins have shields. Shoot 2 against defense 9. They will require 7s. There is 1 9 there, so 1 goblin goes down casualty. And the goblins must then make a morale check. They'll be making that at -1 for the casualty, but +1 for a shooting attack. And they'll get an additional +1 because they're within 6 inches of the tower. So making a check, needing 5s, and they still fail. So they are disordered. And then for their second action, the dwarves will advance up to 5 inches. It will only go part of that way. The final unit to activate on the goblin side will be the goblin spears. They receive -1 for being disordered, so they will require 7s. They succeed with a couple of 9s, so they are no longer disordered, but they may only take a simple action, which is going to be advance 4 inches. No, let's go the whole way, 6 inches. That leaves us with 2 units activating on the dwarf and human side. So we'll start with Baridoc Kingsson. 3 dice requiring 4s. They succeed, and they will be advancing upon the tower 5 inches, followed by a further 2.5. And then the Goldenfields spears, 2 dice requiring 5s. They succeed with an 8 and a 10, and they will be advancing 6 inches. Followed by another 3. And here's the board at the end of turn 2. Turn 3 starts with an initiative roll. We have a 10 for the goblins, so the goblins will take it. I'm pretty sure I know which unit will be activating first, but let's throw down some tokens just to confirm. The archers can shoot, the spears can charge and be charged, and the soldiers can charge and be charged. And I'm also going to give them an advantage for being able to fight from higher ground. So with 3 tokens, I'm definitely going to activate these soldiers first. So 2 dice requiring 6s. They fail. Rot roll. Alright, in that case they're going to wheel on their front corner in order to secure the hill a bit better, while avoiding being within 1 inch of an enemy. And that will be their turn. To start the human and dwarf turn, we will try to activate the Goldenfields bowmen. They required 5s, but 2 2s will not allow them to successfully activate. They are just in range of the goblin archers, and unfortunately they cannot see anything else, so they will be making 5 shots at those goblin archers. So 5 dice, shoot 2, +1 for having an extra rank. -1 for having failed the activation. Shoot 2 on defense 9, they will require 7s. And nobody there, that arrow shower was ineffectual. For the Goblin's turn, we will be activating the Goblin Spearmen because they were the unit with the next most tokens. 2 dice requiring 6s. Double 1s, they're not going to be doing very much. Disappointing. They are, I think, just going to wheel to make it a bit more difficult for those dwarf soldiers to get them. Next up for the dwarves and humans, we're going to attempt to activate the Goldenfields spears. 2 dice requiring 5s. They succeed with a 6, and they will simply be moving forward and into combat with those goblins. So the spears attacking for 5 dice, including the champion dice. The goblins are not going to shield in this case. Fight 2, +1 for having an extra rank, but -1 for attacking the goblins uphill. Means we're fight 2 on defense 9, requiring 7s. That one there is a 5. So unfortunately the spears caused no casualties. And the goblins fighting back with 5 dice. A fight 1, +2 for having extra ranks, -1 for already having activated this turn. So fight 2 on defense 9, requiring 7s. And nothing there either. That whole combat round was a bit of a whiff. So both sides get forced back 1 inch. And we'll call it a draw. So the final goblin unit to activate will be the Goblin Archers. 2 dice requiring 6s. They get a 10, which you can't see because the tower's in the way, but there's a 10 there. So they successfully activate, and they will be shooting at the closest target. The dwarf soldiers are at 11.5 inches, but the human spearmen over there are 10 inches away, so we'll be firing at them. It is still in the front arc of the spearmen, so they're not going to get any flanking bonus there, which is a bit unfortunate, but they'll take their shot. So shoot 1, +1 for having an extra rank, gives us shoot 2 against defense 9, requiring 7s. And there are 2 casualties there. So the humans are required to make a morale check. They will be at -1, -2 for casualties, but then +1 for it being a shooting attack. So 2 dice requiring 6s. And that's 2 4s. That is a failure. They are disordered. On to the dwarves and the humans' turn. They have 2 units left, the archers and Baridoc Kingsson himself. So we're going to activate the archers first. They are within 6 inches of Baridoc's unit. So 3 dice requiring 4s. They succeed with a 4. And they will be shooting directly ahead at the closest target, which is those goblin spears. So they'll get 4 dice because of shielding. They are shoot 2 versus defense 9. They will be requiring 7s. There is 1 10 there, so 1 more goblin goes down. And they must make a morale check. -1 for taking a casualty, but +1 for it being a shooting attack, and +1 for being within 6 inches of the tower. So they'll make the morale check requiring 5s. They succeed with an 8. That's followed up by Baridoc Kingsson's unit activating. 3 dice requiring 4s. They definitely succeed with an 8. And they're not going to be able to reach anything, so they're going to wheel on their front corner and advance 5 inches. Here's how the table looks at the end of turn 3. Let's start turn 4 with an initiative roll. Looks like the dwarves get it with a 9. Lucky them. Because they will be attempting to activate the Goldenfields spears with 2 dice. -1 for being disordered. So requiring 6s. They succeed with a 6. So they are no longer disordered. But they can only take a simple action this turn, which is going to be to wheel on the front corner there and see if they can maneuver those goblins around. We're going to start the goblin turn by attempting to activate the large unit of goblin soldiers. 2 dice requiring 6s. They succeed with a 9. And they are simply going to charge straight forward and into those spears. The Goldenfield spears will be shielding because they've already activated this turn and they're in a bit of a sad position. So the goblins are fight 1 plus 2 for extra ranks, giving them fight 3. They don't get their charge bonus because the spears have braced. So fight 3 against defense 9, they'll require 6s. Ouch, 3 of the humans go down. The humans will be striking back 4 dice, including the champion dice. They are fight 2, -1 for having already activated this turn. So fight 1 on defense 9 means they will require 8s. There is 1 10 there, so 1 goblin goes down in retaliation. Let's do some morale checks. So we'll start with the humans. They get -3 for the 3 wounds, giving them 2 dice, and they will require 8s. They succeed with an 8, and the goblins must also make a check. They are -1 for casualties, but +1 for having at least 2 ranks, and +1 for being within range of the tower. So they'll make their check needing 5s, and they fail. So they, even through a successful charge, become disordered. And they're going to be pushing the human spears back 6 inches. Let's get them right out of the way. Seeing their Felden Goldenfieldians take a beating, the Goldenfield bowmen are going to attempt to activate. 2 dice requiring 5s. They succeed with an 8 or 9, and they're going to fire 4 shots straight ahead at the goblin soldiers. They are shoot 2, +1 for having an extra rank, shoot 3 against defense 9. They will require 6s. There is 1 success there with a 10, so 1 more goblin goes down. The goblins must now make a morale check. They are -1 for taking a casualty, -1 for being disordered, +1 for having at least 2 ranks, +1 for being within range of the tower, and +1 for it being a shooting attack. So they're going to make their check with a +1. They will require 5s. They succeed in a 9 or a 10, so they don't run away. On the goblins' turn, they will be attempting to activate the goblin spears. 2 dice requiring 6s. They do not succeed, so unfortunately they can only make a simple action this turn. So what they're going to do is they're going to continue to wheel, hoping to open up the flank of those dwarf soldiers while keeping their own safe. So we're going to wheel on that corner there, which should keep their flank safe from the dwarf archers for the moment. So we shall attempt to activate the dwarf archers. They are out of range of Baridoc at the moment, so 2 dice requiring 4s. A 6 will be a success, and they will be shooting directly at the goblin spearmen. Goblin spearmen still get shields, so 4 dice, shoot 2 on defense 9 requiring 7s. 1 8 there, so that's 1 casualty for the goblins. We must now make a morale check. They'll be making that at -1 for the casualty, +1 for it being a shooting attack, and +1 for being in range of the tower, so they will require 5s. And they do not succeed, and they become disordered. The final goblin unit to activate is the goblin archers, 2 dice requiring 6s. They succeed with a 7. And they'll be shooting at the closest target, which is the dwarf soldiers in front of them. 4 dice because of shielding. Shoot 1, +1 for having an extra rank as I shoot 2 on defense 10, requiring 8s. Nothing there, and they are just going to shift sideways a little bit as their second action. The last unit to activate this turn is Baridoc Kingsson and his Hammerheart Oathsworn. 3 dice requiring 4s. They succeed with a 9. And they will be moving directly forward, contacting Goblin Spearmen and fighting a round of combat there. The goblins will be shielding, so the dwarves will get 4 dice, including the champion dice. They are fight 2 on defense 9, so they will require 7s. Nothing there. The goblins will fight back with 4 dice. They are fight 1, -1 for being disordered, so fight 0 on defense 10. They will require 10s. And there are 2 10s. 2 dwarves fall to the panicked goblins. So the dwarves will be required to make a morale check after having thoroughly lost that fight. They'll receive -2 for the casualties, so they will be requiring 6s on 3 dice. They succeed, so they are not disordered, but the goblins are going to push the dwarves back 6 inches. Shameful display. Here we are at the end of turn 4 with the goblins fighting back ferociously. Alright, here's the initiative roll for turn 5. Looks like it's going to the dwarves with a 6. Alright, and we're going to start by activating the archers. They will need a 5 on 2 dice. They get it. Whoops, there we go. They get it. 5 and a 7. And they will be shooting straight at that unit of disordered goblins. So they get to shield. So it'll be 4 dice. Shoot 2, +1 for having an extra rank. Shoot 3 on defense 9, requiring 6s. There are 1, 2, 3 there. So the goblins now make a morale check. -3 for the casualties, minus another one for being disordered, gives them -4, +1 for having at least 2 ranks, +1 because it's shooting, and +1 because they are within 6 inches of the tower. So they'll be making a morale check at -1, needing 7s to pass. And 8, they're going to stick around. And because those goblins are in the worst position, we shall attempt to activate them and remove that disordered token. So they will need 7s to activate. They successfully activate with a 9, so we remove the disordered token. And they cannot charge, but they can move. I think we're just going to wheel slightly to make sure we can hold on to that hill. So, after failing to send the first unit of goblins back to the hills, we're going to try and activate Baridoc with 3 dice in order to get this other lot off. They need 4s, and they successfully got 4s, so they're going to advance 5 inches straight forward. And then use the second action to move into contact. The goblins will shield, so the dwarves get 4 dice, including the champion dice. They are fight 2 on defense 9, so they require 7s. There is 1 7 there, so 1 goblin goes down as casualty. And the goblins get to strike back, 4 dice. They are fight 1, -1 because they are disordered. So fight 0 on defense 10, they require 10s. There are 2 there. So 2 dwarves go down. So the dwarves have lost that fight as well. Let's do some morale checks. Let's start with the goblins. The goblins have -1 for being disordered, -1 for the casualty, but +1 because they're within 6 inches of a tower. So they'll need 7s. They fail. So with that, the goblins are going to run away. And the dwarves also make a morale check. They're at -2 because they suffered 2 casualties, so they will need 6s with 3 dice. And they succeed on a 7. The goblins, having won the fight though, are going to force the dwarves back 6 inches before running away. The last goblin unit to activate will be the archers, 2 dice requiring 6s. They succeed with an 8, and they'll be shooting at the closest target, which are the dwarf soldiers there. Let's check the facing on that. They'll be shooting the dwarf soldiers in the front, so they'll get 4 dice. Shoot 1, +1 for the extra rank. On defense 10 means 8s. And there is 1 8 there. So 1 more dwarf goes down. The dwarves must now make a morale check. they'll make that at -2 because they've suffered 1 casualty and they are less than a full rank. So they will need 5s, and they succeed with a 10. The goblins are then going to advance in the hope that they'll get a shot on the flank of the dwarves next turn. Which they are now in a position to do so. Let's now activate the dwarf archers. They are just within 6 inches of the prince there, so they'll get 3 dice. They will require 4s. They succeed with a 9. But where they are right now, they are unable to draw line of sight to the goblins, as the unit of dwarfs is actually blocking their line of sight to the officer of the goblins. So what they're going to have to do is use their first action to advance, or in this case I'm going to wheel, which will then give them line of sight, and they will shoot 5 dice at the goblin archers. They are shoot 2 versus defense 9, so they will require 7s, and there is nothing there. Right. The final unit to activate will be the Goldenfields spears. 2 dice requiring 5s, an 8 and a 10 will do the job. And they are going to simply advance into contact with those goblins up to 6 inches. So they'll move in and then align to the front. So the humans attack with 5 dice. The goblins are not going to shield in this situation. And that 5 dice includes the champion die. They are fight 2, -1 because they are attacking uphill. So fight 1 on defense 9, they require 8s. There is 1 10 there. So 1 of the goblins goes down, and the goblins will fight back. The goblins get 5 dice. They are fight 1, +1 for a rank, but -1 for already having activated. So fight 1 on defense 9 is 8s, and they get 3 there. So the humans soundly lost that one again. Let's start with a morale check for the goblins. The goblins suffer -1 for having lost a casualty, but +1 for having 2 ranks or more, and a further +1 for being next to the watchtower, so they will require 5s. They fail their morale check, so they are once again disordered. And the humans must make a morale check at -4. -3 for the casualties, and an additional 1 because they have less than 1 rank. So 2 dice, they will require 9s. 8 almost, but not quite. And the goblins are going to force them back 6 inches. So here we are at the end of turn 5. Right, starting with initiative. The dwarves get it with a 9, and they'll start by activating the Goldenfields bowmen. So 2 dice requiring 5s. They succeed with a 10, and the bowmen will be shooting at the disordered goblins right in front of them. So 4 dice because of shielding. Shoot 2, +1 for a rank. Shoot 3 against defense 9. They'll need 6s. There are 1, 2, 3 hits there. So 3 goblins go down. And they must make a morale check. They'll be making their morale check with -3 for casualties, a further -1 for being disordered, and a +1 for being next to the tower. So -3, they'll need 9s. There is a 9, they are going to stick around. So let's have a look at the advantages and disadvantages of the goblins. We have the unit of soldiers who are at a disadvantage for being disordered, and a disadvantage for being within charge range of spears over there. And we have the archers who have an advantage for being able to shoot, an advantage for being on the flank of the dwarf soldiers, and probably an advantage because they could charge. Even if we combine that shooting and charging into one advantage, we therefore have 2 advantages versus 2 disadvantages, and we go with the unit that has more advantages, so we'll be activating the archers first. So 2 dice, requiring 6s to activate. They succeed with a 10. So after a bit of thinking, I've decided that the Goblin Archers are going to wheel on the front corner. And then they are going to charge into the Dwarf Soldiers and fight a round of combat. Alright, so the Goblins hit the flank of the Dwarf unit, so they'll be getting 5 dice. But in this case, Baridoc is going to force his way to the front and he is going to fight alone. So they'll be against his stats. So we'll have 5 dice, fight of 0, +1 for an extra rank, and +1 for flanking. So 2 on defense 11, they'll need 9s to cause casualties. There is 1 9 there, so one of the Dwarf Soldiers goes down, because you always apply the damage to the unit first. And then Baridoc will fight back. He has 2 combat dice, including the champion dice, and is fight 3. So fight 3 on 9s, he will require 6s. And he gets 1 casualty back. So the combat is a draw. Both sides will be pushed back 1 inch, but both sides must make a morale check. So Baridoc makes his check at -1 for -2, -1 for the casualty, and minus an additional 1 for being less than a full rank. So he will need 6s. There is a 6 there, so that unit remains alright. And the Goblin Archers must make a check. They'll be making it at -1 for a casualty, but +1 for being in range of the tower. So a straight roll needing 6s. They succeed with a 7. And then both units are just pushed back an inch. On the human and dwarves turn, we'll be activating the remnants of the Goldenfield spears. So 2 dice requiring 5s. They succeed with 6s. And they will be charging straight back into those goblins to see if they can rout them from the field. So Edmund the Ox will be fighting alone. It's time for him to show everybody that he can carry this and earn his nickname. He has 3 dice. He has fight value of 4. So 3 dice including the champion dice. 4 on defense 9, he requires 5s. And he does nothing. Rot roll. Okay, and the goblins strike back. They have 5 dice. They are fight 1, -1 for being disordered. So fight 0 on defense 10, they will require 10s. And there is nothing there either. So this combat was a draw. So both units are forced back 1 inch. And both counters haven't been activated. The final unit requiring activation is the Dwarf Archers. I think they'll be pushing it to be within 6 inches, so we'll use of the prince, so we'll use 2 dice requiring 4s. A 5 is a success, but currently they cannot draw line of sight to the Goblin Archers, because you cannot draw a line from the officer of the unit to the officer of the goblins. So they're going to have to use their first action to move, and they will be shifting sideways. We're going to go this way. 2.5 inches, which will now allow them to draw line of sight to the enemy unit's officer and make a shooting attack. So 5 dice at shoot value 2 on defense 9 means they require 7s, and there is nothing there. Here we are at the end of turn 6, and things are starting to look dire for the humans and the dwarves. As always, let's start with an initiative roll. The goblins are going to get that with a 10. And the goblins once again are going to start by activating the archers. So 2 dice requiring 6s. They successfully activate with the 10. And once again they're going to charge into the flank of the dwarf soldiers. So the goblins will be getting 5 dice. Fight 0 +1 for being in the flank. And once again Baridoc is going to fight alone. So fight 1 against defense 11, they'll require 10s. There are no 10s there. And because Baridoc is fighting alone, he gets 2 dice, including the champion dice. Fight 3 on defense 9 means he requires 6s. And there are 3 wounds there, double from the champion dice and a 7, so 3 of those archers go down. Alright, so the goblin archers are going to have to make a morale check. They're going to make that at -3 for casualties, but +1 for being near the tower. So they will require 8. 7, it's very close but not enough. The goblins are now disordered. And the dwarves are going to choose to push them back by 1 inch. On the humans and dwarves turn, we are once again going to activate the Goldenfield bowmen, because the enemy soldiers can't charge, so we may as well try and shoot them and send them away before we risk our spears. So 2 dice requiring 5s, they succeed with a 10. They'll be making 4 shots, shoot 2, +1 for having an extra rank. Against defense 9 means they'll need 6s. And there is nothing there, nothing but 1s and 2s. Alright, the goblins will now have a chance to activate. So they will be using 2 dice. They get -1 for being disordered, so they require 7s to successfully activate. Double 2s, they're not going anywhere. They remain disordered. They can do a simple action, which there's probably not a lot for them to do at the moment, so I think they're just going to stay there. Alright, let's activate the Goldenfield spears then. So 2 dice requiring 5s. They succeed on an 8. And they will use their first action to charge into combat. Once again, Edmund the Ox is going to try and show everyone why he's called the Ox and carry this battle by himself. He gets 3 dice. Combat value is 4. He does get -1 for charging uphill, which I forgot about last time, but we're here now. So 3 on 9 requiring 6s. And that is 4 casualties. Double because of the champion dice. The goblins get to fight back. They will fight back with 5 dice. Fight 1, -1 for being disordered, and a further -1 for having already activated this turn. So -1 on defense 10. They will require 11s. So looking for 10s and nothing there. So it looks like Edmund the Ox is going to carry this one. The goblins will require a morale check. They are at -4 for casualties, minus a further 1 for being disordered, but +1 because they are within range of the tower. So at -4 they will require 10s. Nope, and with that, those goblin soldiers have had enough and they are going to run for the hills. That leaves us with the final unit to activate, the dwarf archers. 2 dice requiring 4s. They succeed on a 6, and they will once again be shooting into those goblin archers. So 5 dice, shoot 2 against defense 9. They will require 7s. There are 1, 2, 3 casualties there. So the goblins must make a morale check. -3 for casualties, minus an additional 1 for being disordered, +1 for it being a shooting attack, +1 because they're near the tower, but -1 because they have less than 5 models. So they're at -3, so they will require 9s to stick around. A 9, they are going to stick around. Cheeky buggers. Here we are at the end of turn 7. So, turn 8, the final turn of the game. Let's roll initiative. Initiative goes to the dwarves with an 8. So, the dwarves will start by activating Baridoc and the Hammerheart Oathsworn. 3 dice, requiring 4s. They succeed with an 8, although that was a fairly close thing. They're going to pivot on the officer as their first action, and their second action will be to move into contact with the goblin archers. So the Hammerheart Oathsworn will have 3 dice. They are fight 2 against defense 9, so they will need 7s. There is a 10 and an 8 there, so 2 casualties. And the goblins fight back, 3 dice. They are fight 0 against defense 10, so they will require 10s. Nothing there. So the dwarves obviously won that. The goblins must now make a morale check. They'll be making that at -4, but +1 for the tower there, so they will need 9s. And the jammy bastards succeed with a 10. So the dwarves are going to push the last remaining goblin back by 6 inches. And they both count as being activated. The goblins have no units to activate, so we're going to activate the Goldenfields bowmen. 2 dice requiring 5s. They succeed with the 10. And they are going to shoot directly at the last remaining goblin. They should be within range. They definitely are. So 5 dice, shoot 3. 2 +1 for having the extra rank. On 9s means that they require 6s. And there we go, the last of the goblins is cut down. And we're going to call that the end of the battle. I think I'm going to call that a draw. The goblins were entirely destroyed in the field, but the dwarves and the humans were unable to complete the objective of destroying the towers by the end of turn 8, because they require activating while within 1 inch of them, which unfortunately none of the units are in range to be able to achieve. So yep, I think we'll call that a draw. So we have a couple of units that are in a very, very sad state. We've got Hammerheart's Oathsworn and the Goldenfields Spears. So they'll both have to roll to see if the unit itself can survive, using the destroyed unit's battle honours table in Battlesworn. They get a bonus to the roll equal to the number of remaining models in the unit. So if we start with the Goldenfield Spears, take a roll, they add +2 to the result. They get an 8, so they have light casualties. They are going to fight in the next battle at normal strength. And for the Hammerheart Oathsworn, they're going to add 3. They get a 9, they are also alright. Wow, so that was right down to the wire. I can't believe how close that was in the end there. We managed to wipe out all of the goblins, but unfortunately the mission objective couldn't be achieved in time. So yeah, I think I have to call that a draw. We had some success, but we definitely didn't achieve the mission we set out to do. So we'll see what effect that's going to have on the campaign going forward. I was really impressed with the goblins again. They really, really put up a hell of a fight. Once again, they were outnumbered points-wise. They still managed to do some damage. Wow! This was the first time I ever used characters fighting alone in combat, so that was an interesting experience. It definitely helps the unit stick around when it's looking really rough. And that +1 bonus to the morale from the towers helped those goblins stick around for ages. Loved it. I was a little bit disappointed that the goblins in the towers were wiped out so quickly. I was hoping that they'd stick around a little bit longer, but the dice wouldn't let it be. Anyway, let me know what you thought of the battle down below. Let me know what you thought of the scenario. And thanks for sticking around. We'll see you next time. Cheers.